Recording in progress.
Is the line of speakers still the same?
Here the line of speakers can start.
Emily Damar. Okay, perfect. Out of the moment. Yes.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you for your patience because we have technical problems with the Zoom. But now I think we can ready to roll on. A very good morning for all of us who gather here in this place in Brisbane, Australia. And also those who is joining through the Zoom platform. It's very early for them because they're probably like 3 or 4 hours before us. So I suggest them to get some coffee or sip some tea to get the caffeine. It is a pleasant time for me to meet you again to discuss a critical issue that is not just confined to Southeast Asia, but resonates globally. This is the challenge of content moderation in the digital age. So my name is Damar Juniarto. I'm Executive Director at SafeNet. We are a regional digital rights organization based in Bali, Indonesia. This morning, I'm acting as your moderator on site on today's session, Content Moderation, Policy Advancing Technology for Democracy. This session is hosted by OpenNet Korea University. On this session, specifically, I will delve into how Southeast Asia is tackling problems related to disinformation, influence operation, hate speech, and also the weaponization of social media. This issue, while it's not unique to the region, have profound implication for its society, political, and also the future. I will also help you to facilitate the discussion of a relation between government, civil society, and tech companies to tackling this issue. So when we heard about this information, we know that this is something related with the deliberative of spread of false and misleading information. This is probably the most adversary problems in digital landscape. In Southeast Asia, as part of the world, this phenomenon is eroding trust in institutions, sowing discord, and also threatening to the integrity of election. Some of the Southeast Asia now has election year. So government, civil society, and tech companies all recognized the gravity of this problem. One approach to tackle disinformation is to promote digital literacy. Governments, NGOs in Southeast Asia are investing programs to teach citizens critical thinking skills, enabling them to distinguish between reliable and unreliable sources of information. Additionally, we are also working to ensure transparency in online advertising, campaign finance to curtail the financing of disinformation campaign. So we know all of this initiative. Another thing, influence operation. This is something that emerged in many of Southeast Asia countries, which involve the use of online platforms to manipulate public opinion and decision making. This is another grave concern. Foreign and domestic actors have leveraged social media to amplify divisive narratives, exploit societal fault lines, and also advance their agendas. To counter influence operation, countries in Southeast Asia are increasingly cooperating on intelligence sharing and also developing national strategies for resilience. They are also urging social media companies to enhance transparency and to take more responsibility for identifying and removing inauthentic behavior account and also black propagandas. Hate speech is a pervasive problem in the digital space. Online platforms has become breeding grounds of bigotry, racism, and xenophobia. Southeast Asia is not immune to this issue, apparently, while online hate speech often translating into real-world violence. We've seen that some of the hate speech become real threats for the people. Government in the region are grappling with the challenge of regulating hate speech without infringing on the freedom of speech. Striking the right balance is difficult because sometimes this is the problems is allies because the legislation and code of conduct to address online hate speech sometimes curb the democracy of the people, and we have to ensure that all this effort must respect human rights and democratic values. The last thing that we also found when we are talking about counter-moderation policy is the weaponization of social media that becoming more trend, where platforms are used as tools to incite violence and unrest. Southeast Asia had witnessed instances where false rumors and hate speech on social media have triggered real-world conflict. So to counter weaponization of social media, we are investing in advanced technology like AI and machine learning to detect and counter harmful content. Additionally, they are also trying to strengthen the laws against incitement to violence and working with a tech company to monitor and report on suspicious activities. Probably you all know what happened recently, that some of the tech company decide to release a policy to regulate the incitement by the political leaders that create harm for the opponents or for the people. So I know that this is a tough topic for this particular morning, but I know and this is a complex and also multi-layer problems. But I think the good thing is when we talk about Southeast Asia and also Asia Pacific in bigger pictures, we are now seeing some of the initiatives, a coordinated effort between the government, civil society, and the tech companies. One of the reasons why we have this session, because in Southeast Asia, SafeNet, my organization, and Foundation of Media Alternative based in Philippines, with the support of Global Network Initiative, began to form Southeast Asia Collaborative Policy Network back in March this year. So that's why I'm welcoming all the speakers that part of the CCPN to join me online. So I'm the only person here. I'm so sorry, there's a lot of empty space next to me, but the rest will be joining online. Lisa Garcia, Oliver Spencer, Emily Predicit, they will all join online, and also not to forget Professor K.S. Park from Korea. So I'm turning the floor to Lisa Garcia from FMA Philippines to introduce CCPN, the Southeast Asia Collaborative Policy Network, and the need for a better alliance between civil society and tech companies to contain disinformation and hate speech in Southeast Asia region. Are you here with us, Lisa? Lisa is not joined yet. Okay. Probably I can move to the speaker first. I know that Emily is joining, right? So when we talk about the situation, I will begin with one of the problems that appear and also related with the content moderation here is about the rise of censorship from the administrative censorship. We've seen this problem in Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand, and Indonesia. They have implement mandatory notice and takedown system where criminals or civil liability are imposed on intermediaries for failure to take down or block websites when government agency make the request. We would like to discuss how we can work with ISP and tech company to push back on these censorship orders and not complying with the international human rights standards. We will discuss on what arguments that we can present to them, what procedures and protocols we can establish to provide providing feedbacks on the requests. We will focus on this. The first one, I think we will focus on how we do it. And to talk about this, I will invite Professor K.S. Park from OpenNet Korea. So, Professor, are you here?
I am here, but I think the order is Emily goes first, and the tech team also will present the presentations in that order. So I think Emily should go first.
Okay. Let's change a bit. I think we can start with what is the situation, current situation in Laos and also Thailand. Emily Predicit, the Executive Director of Manuyasa Foundation, will join the floor. I will invite you to speak.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Damar. Good morning, everybody who joined. It's 6 a.m. It's a little bit after 6 a.m. here, so I'll do my best to cover, but thank you so much for this very important session. It's a pleasure to be here, part of the coalition of NGOs that was created by SafeNet and Foundation for Media Alternative to find ways to work together with companies, because there's a real need to address content moderation in the region, as Dama has explained. So I'm the founder and executive director of the Manushaya Foundation, and we are a foundation based in Thailand, working mainly in Laos and Thailand, and digital rights is one of our thematic focus. I've been sharing my presentation, and I'm not sure whether you can see it because I see me.
Yes, we can see.
Okay. So
we see it, but there is a big block in the center that's kind of covering the center area. I think you're supposed to press OK.
Okay, no problem. We are working on it. Please continue, Emily.
Okay. All right. So what I'm going to focus today is really the rise on digital dictatorship in Thailand and Laos when it comes to state-led restrictive content moderation policy, but also state-led disinformation and trolling that is happening over social media platforms in those two countries, and also the lack of responses from tech companies. So the need for us to be able to come together and really build an alliance to work with companies to uphold digital rights in the region. So really, when we are looking at what is digital hardship, I don't think I need to go on that, but it's really the rise of cyber laws and the weaponization of laws that are taking place in Thailand and in Laos to control our online freedom, to censor activists and dissenting by weaponizing the notion of national security. So what is happening?
Sorry, Emily. Can you press the presenter window for us, please?
Yeah. Do you see better?
No, still, you have to click on the cross.
There's a dialog box that appeared in the middle of the screen. That's
Yes, Emily,
blocking
maybe if you can
PowerPoint.
reshare your presentation because we're seeing your, yes, if you could reshare it and then we can see it again. Thank you.
It's being shared by Emily. It's not being shared by the organizers.
No.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. I thought they're going to show the presentation. Anyway. Okay. This is good.
Can you reshare? Okay. Thanks. Okay. Make it full screen,
Perfect.
please. Yeah. Okay. Please continue, Emily.
Okay, thanks so much. So I was explaining that the rise of digital hardship that is happening in Thailand and Laos is through the weaponization of the notion of national security, because any critiques of the government or government agencies become a threat to national security. So that's how governments in those two countries have been able to weaponize cyber laws or existing laws to crack down on dissenting voices online. And so really, when we are looking at content moderation in Thailand and Laos, we are faced with several issues. One is that the balancing platform dedication to free speech necessitates them to be able to work with us. But what we are noticing is the high reliance of Meta and other social media platforms on flaggers, who are not necessarily the flaggers that we were hoping they would be working with, but also the misuse of AI and AI bias, the lack of understanding of the local language and the nuances of language. So not removing content that should be removed or not blocking content that should be blocked. And when this is being flagged, it's not being taken into consideration. And also when we are talking about content moderation in those two countries, I would like to flag on briefly what is happening in Laos as well as in Thailand. I know that I should focus more on Thailand, but because there is the rise of digital hardship in Laos, I think it's important to also inform people that there is an extensive government control in Laos, and there is oversight over internet and social media. There's the penal code that is being weaponized under Article 117, which is related to anti-state propaganda. That is cracking down on dissenting voices who are voicing the concern online through Facebook Lives or through social media posts. But there's also an increase of threats from the government, who has totally control over the media, because there's a state-led media totally controlled by the one state party. And recently the Lao government has threatened more control over content, especially domestic content, expressing the high worries about content that is coming from abroad, that is spreading false information against the Lao government. And they are currently discussing on how they are going to be able to block and control content from accounts that are based outside of the country, but targeting the Lao government. And I would also like to share the recent case of Jack, who is an activist who was gunned down on 29 April in Vientiane, Laos, because of his online activism. He's a famous admin of a well-known youth pro-democracy page in Laos, driven by the keyboard. And thankfully he survived, and now he's outside of Laos.
Emily, are you going to flip through the next pages of the presentation? We haven't seen the same page for a while.
Yeah, I changed to Thailand. I'm on Thailand now. What do you see now on the screen, or I can just...
What is digital dictatorship?
Okay, well, it seems that the sharing doesn't work, because I'm on another slide already. I'm talking about Thailand, and the slide is on Thailand.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, there you go. Now we see. Now we see Thailand page.
Okay, so I think I cannot be on full screen for people to be able to see. Okay, yeah. So regarding Thailand, so in Thailand, we have the misuse of the CCA, what we call the Computer Crime Act, which is really the law that is being weaponized by the government to crack down on dissenting voices. There's a specific section 14 that is related to false information. So anyone who is spreading false information and information against national security can be jailed up to 15 years per instance. And so what is very worrying is the takedown order, the ministerial notification takedown order that entered into force during Christmas last year. So it was the Thai government Christmas gift, if you want. It was passed by the Ministry of Digital Economy and Society, and it's a very, very restrictive content moderation policy because it urges social media platform to basically take down content that is deemed to be false information according to the Computer Crime Act within 24 hours. There is a lack of oversight, and social media platform and internet providers shall be removing all requests coming from users as well as the government without any oversight, as I explained. And there's a compulsory compliance with complaints. So we are very worried by this ministerial decree that is reinforcing the power of the government and increasing digital literacy over social media platform. What we are also worried about is all the instances where URLs are being blocked. So for Thailand, we have some data. We know that from July 2020 to July 2023, there have been more than 181 to almost 200 cases of activists and people who have been charged under the Computer Crime Act. And in 2022 only, there have been like more than 6,000 URLs that have been restricted by the ministry. And among those 6,000, more than 4,000 URLs have been restricted for allegedly insulting the monarchy and being a threat to national security. So now I would like to share more about digital literacy through state-led disinformation, which is very, very prominent in Laos and Thailand. And I think this is where we are seeing the most action by the government. It's easier for the government to attack dissident and activists, but also to manipulate information through state-led disinformation and trolling. And really, it's the people who are the receiving end of the trolling by the government and state-led disinformation. It's really activists, vulnerable groups, women human rights defenders. So if you look at the case of Thailand alone, we saw the growth of a cyber army in October 2020. We knew that there were already ISOC, so the intelligence section of the military in Thailand, that was already trolling women human rights defenders and activists. But in October 2020, the government decided to create what we call a cyber army that is directly under the Royal Thai Army, and that is focusing on information operations, so what we call IOs. And it's a military-backed information manipulation. Back in 2020 and back in 2021, so when Twitter had quite a decent Twitter policy team, they were able to take down over 900 accounts linked to the Royal Thai Army. And in March 2021, Facebook was able to remove 185 accounts that was also linked to the military and that were involving information operations accounts as well. And but with the rise of digital literacy, I would say also within social media platform, especially Twitter, we are not seeing such supports from tech companies anymore. And there has been a rise of cyber attacks against Thai human rights organizations. And there has been an average of 2,388 attacks as per 2023 alone. So now I would like to share with you some specific case studies of trolling, especially against women human rights defenders. So there are prominent women human rights defender in Thailand, Kunankana Nilapajit, who used to be a human rights commissioner at the National Human Rights Commission of Thailand, and who is now also a UN expert within the UN Working Group on Enforced Disappearance. And Shana Hemina, who is a prominent women human rights defender from the South. And they are both working on Thailand's southern parts in Pattani, supporting human rights defenders and women human rights defenders there. And because they are women in a very restrictive patriarchal setting, and because they are denouncing also torture perpetrated by the military, they have been subjected to a state-led disinformation campaign orchestrated by ISOC, so Thailand military, via information operations account. They have been spreading false information against them, calling them names, undermining their vital work, trying to influence the population in the southern part of Thailand to basically go against those two prominent women human rights defenders. The two women human rights defenders decided to fight back against the Thai military. And in May 2022, they decided to sue the Prime Minister office. However, in February of this year, the case was dismissed by the Bangkok Civil Court, stating that there was insufficient evidence of trolling by the government. And so for us, it raises accountability and human rights defenders' concern. It raises a lack of accountability from the government, but also from social media platform who could have assisted in providing and also in testifying that they were effectively state-led disinformation campaign against the two women human rights defenders.
Emily, can you wrap up in 1 minute? Thank you.
Yeah. In Laos myself, sometimes I'm a victim of state-led disinformation when regarding our work. So during COVID, I was accused of bringing Lao youth to Thailand and sending them back to Laos with COVID and paying them 3,000 to 5,000 Thai baht to cross the border and then bringing back COVID into the country. So what we really want from tech companies, it's really for tech companies to be able to work with us. But we know that the trusted flaggers system is not working. And I think my colleagues are going to elaborate further on that. We know that those trusted flaggers are not working, that even if you're part of the group and you flag content, it's not necessarily taken into consideration. And we always receive answers such as, it's going to be very difficult for Meta to prove that any links or any content that we are sending to them are actually violating the community standards. And even if they are violating community standards, tech companies themselves are being restricted by the domestic legal framework of the country they are operating. And so I have put here some recommendations to governments and tech companies for them to be able to uphold digital rights. So obviously for governments, it's to amend any cyber laws that are being weaponized against human rights defenders, but also protect the safety of human rights defenders, ensuring intersectionality and genderless in the policies and stop judicial harassment. And for tech companies, it's really to adhere to the UNGPs, to be able to work with us and embrace the GNI principles concerning freedom of expression, and develop precise guidelines in terms of services that define prohibited speech, but really being able to work with us, because as much as we are trying to build an alliance and work with tech companies from Thailand and Laos, we have the impression that tech companies are working more closely with governments, authoritarian governments, and responding to authoritarian governments' requests more than hearing and seeing us when we are talking to them about the need to effectively moderate content in support of human rights defenders and not against. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. So we hear from what happened in Thailand and Laos. I will continue by inviting Oliver Spencer, consultant for the Free Expression Myanmar. Are you here, Oliver?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, please continue to share with us what is the situation on content moderation in Myanmar, and also what are some initiatives that you did in Myanmar. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, thanks for inviting me, and a very early morning here in Chiang Mai in Thailand. So I'll just explain a little bit about the different dynamics at work in the experiences in Myanmar in regards to social media content moderation. What we've found over the past few years is that there are multiple rights that are being exercised online that we come across problems with. Most of the platforms, with the exception of one or two, are overwhelmingly focused on enforcing limitations of rights rather than enabling them. And this is mainly due, I mean, the core reason for this is around the sort of algorithmic advertising that's based on prioritizing more time on the platform rather than encouraging better content. And unfortunately, because of obviously this priority of more time, it kind of encourages increased conflict, gossip, things about sex, etc. And that means that the platforms find themselves constantly sort of fighting to delete this kind of content. What we've come across in particular is three sort of areas where there is particular issues. The first is about how the platforms sort of algorithmically curate in a way that undermines international human rights standards. A really good example of this was Meta's global rollout of its current affairs deprioritization policy. They call it something different, but I'm obviously explaining it from our point of view. So what Meta did is that because of the problem of the American polarization, political polarization, they decided to deprioritize current affairs content on the Facebook platform. And in countries like Myanmar, where Facebook is basically the primary, if in some cases, the only source of public affairs information, if you deprioritize current affairs information, you have a significant impact on the information ecosystem of the country. So what happened is that they deprioritized what they regard as current affairs, which comes from, for example, news media outlets, and then and that was left in favor of basically disinformation and misinformation that was created by non-reliable sources. At the time, there was a big warning that went to Facebook that this is the likely impact in the Myanmar ecosystem. And just this month, we found out from multiple media outlets that were meeting up to discuss that it has had a huge impact on their audiences. So we can see here how the algorithmic curation has a drastic impact at the local level. And that's basically also policy related to the global space, which is principally directed at North America and possibly Europe, and the impact that it has on the global South. The second area is that about platforms under moderating. So the best example in the Myanmar context is Telegram. So Telegram's, as you all know, has almost no moderation whatsoever. What you can see from this in regards to at the national level is that there's a massive amount of what would be potentially unlawful content that spreads in the information ecosystem. So what we see in Myanmar is a massive amount of trolling, impersonation, doxing. We've got things like slut shaming, image-based sexual violence, and so forth. And then it also includes under moderation of content that is, that there is no debate about, that is entirely, completely unlawful in almost every jurisdiction, if not every jurisdiction in the world. And in the Myanmar context, that's violent threats, it's harassment, intimidation, cyber stalking, and in many cases, direct incitement. So that's incitement to violence, as well as incitement to discrimination. So we can see here that under moderation, not only has it leads to an increase in sort of content that is on the border between lawful and unlawful, but also just purely unlawful content that is spreading due to a lack of moderation. And the third type that we see is over moderation. So this is platforms that over moderate or that cheaply moderate. You know, they do it in a very cheap way to save resources. So what we see is a very broad approach to moderation. And this encapsulates far beyond what international standards would allow moderation to remove. This is partly due to under-resourcing, but also just due to the nature of the kind of content that the platform attracts. Over-moderation in Myanmar is seen in particular in regards to Facebook. What we see is that you know, platforms basically, they have a sort of pick and choose approach to which international standards that they abide by and which they ignore. A good example of this, while claiming that they're protecting human rights. So they claim they're protecting human rights, but then they ignore certain standards. And a good example of this in regards to over-moderation is Meta's dangerous organizations and individuals policy. So this is a policy that applies very much to conflict areas like Myanmar. And it's obviously, in Meta's explanation, it will be to remove content that they don't want on the website. But their policy says that by default, that they will remove content that is neutral about organizations that they classify as dangerous organizations that are individuals. So by default, they remove anything that's neutral. And obviously, in a country like Myanmar, where there is massive conflict, there is a significant amount of so-called neutral content about these dangerous organizations, because the media coverage obviously is primarily focused on dangerous organizations because they are the belligerents in the conflict. And also the public is very interested in what the you know, these so-called dangerous organizations and individuals are doing. So by Meta having a default of removing content that is neutral, it includes a vast amount of information that offline would be completely acceptable and is completely protected by international human rights standards. So you can see there just an example of how you know, over moderation in policy and then the impact on the ground in countries that are dealing with these very difficult questions. Obviously, in regards to over moderation, Meta has established the oversight board, and the oversight board has only heard one case in regards to Myanmar, and that was about hate speech, which the oversight board did reject for the same reason that they said that Meta's decision to remove the content did not abide by their own community standards and international human rights standards.
Oliver,
So, yeah.
can you wrap up?
Yeah, sure. So actually, that was my my last sentence. So I will wrap up here, and I mean, just to put forward some to follow Emily, and just put forward to some sort of recommendations. I mean, the key issue for us in regards to content moderation is the impact of the large focus on advertising and ensuring that the people's eyes remain on the platform. And almost all of the problems that we have in dealing with these companies come from, originate from that particular problem, and the company's unwillingness to address that basic conflict between them wanting to keep people for longer on their platforms versus encouraging good quality content. And so, the main focus, for the next few decades is how to reverse that. So we see an improvement or a focus on good quality content and less on content that will drive just public interest in the worst meaning of that. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Oliver. I will let everyone know that since we are starting late, the session will end at 10:05 Okay. Now we have Lisa Garcia already joining through the Zoom. Lisa, can you please explain to us the situation of content moderation in Philippines, but also I would ask again about can you share a bit about the Southeast Asia Collaborative Policy Network that becomes the solution between the communication between civil society and tech companies. So the mic is over to you, Lisa. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Damar. And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to everyone who's here with us in this session. So first of all, maybe I'll discuss about the situation in the Philippines based on the work that we do at the Foundation for Media Alternatives. So my organization has been focusing on online gender-based violence, and since 2012, actually, we've been collecting cases of online gender-based violence, specifically based on the reports that we see on media, those that are reported to us by our partner organizations, and those that are reported to us directly by victims themselves through our online platform. And through the years, what we've seen is an increase in reported cases on media, as well as the different trends happening. And actually, during the height of COVID-19 in 2020, we have seen the most number of reported cases of online gender-based violence in the Philippines. I think this is the same for other countries as well, including Indonesia. And perhaps this is also because of the fact that a lot of people shifted to the online space during that time. So the cases that we usually see are those that are related to online sexual exploitation, the abuse of children, non-consensual sharing of intimate images, and a lot of hate speech as well. We have observed many human rights defenders and journalists who have been maligned online. They have experienced getting, especially the women, they would experience getting rape threats, death threats as well for speaking up about certain issues. In the Philippines, there is such a thing as red tagging, or being labeled as a communist or a supporter of communists, or promoting the communist insurgency in the country. And often it is journalists and human rights defenders who are red tagged. And this has put their lives, as well as those of their families also, at risk. And unfortunately, sometimes it is government or a government agency or an official from the government who does the red tagging. The Philippines does not have a law on hate speech, but that doesn't mean that hate speech doesn't happen. It does, and it can, of course, do a lot of harm to individuals. And we have observed this especially for women. Perhaps I can cite during the 2022 national elections that we had, we have seen how female candidates experienced hate speech online. For instance, Leni Robredo, the lone presidential aspirant among 10 candidates, was a recipient of a lot of hate hateful messages. She was called a lot of names. She was called stupid and airhead, even a prostitute, something like that. Even an alleged intimate video of one of her daughters even surfaced online. Of course, the likes of Robredo, some journalists would have the capacity to engage with platforms, but other people, including local candidates in local posts, may not be as savvy as she is. Of course, Facebook or Meta is still the most popular platform in the country, although there are other popular platforms, YouTube, TikTok, etc. During and after the elections, Meta said that they removed a lot of content containing hate speech because they said that this is like it dehumanizes people, etc. But this was during the elections, and they were really, monitoring well the discussions online. But after the elections, I don't think that they were as gung-ho or as that the monitoring has not been like that. Of course, platforms, when you report to them that there is disinformation, a post that is promoting misinformation, disinformation, it is taken down. But unfortunately, the posts are also shared on other platforms, and it's really difficult to monitor all these things. There is fact checking, of course, but this is mostly done by third-party partners of platforms, and they are limited as well when they do fact checking. And unfortunately, as well, fact checkers also get fact checked by trolls. So, and that puts their reputation also in question when they get fact checked by trolls. Of course, Meta has a country office in the Philippines, and personally, my organization, they know these people in the country office. Thus, for us, if organizations like us who know them, it's easy for us to get in touch with them and report cases. We get invited to their policy briefings, meetings, and consultations, ask them questions, clarify policies, etc. Unfortunately, that is not true for all civil society organizations who are handling different cases, let's say, of gender-based violence, etc. So they don't get the invites to all these events. That is why what we do is to get in touch with these other organizations, and of course, we try to help them. I think, it is useful for organizations also to engage with platforms themselves, because they do experience a lot of, of course, being subject to harassment, perhaps even violence online. It puts their reputation at risk, etc. It is important for them to get to talk to these platforms, to engage with them, so that when they so that they know what to do when they experience abuse, etc. And being a member of an alliance, I think, is something that would help. And this would segue me to the formation of the Southeast Asia Collaborative Policy Network. Of course, this is something that was recently established in May of this year. It is a coalition of several organizations, civil society organizations in Southeast Asia that aim to promote internet freedom through developing the capacity of civil society organizations to engage and have dialogues with ICT companies, whether these are tech companies, ISPs, or telcos, as well as to engage as well and have dialogues with governments and even the ASEAN, since we are in this region. We know that we in the region, we share a lot of issues that are common to us: mass surveillance, disinformation. Since it's going to be election time for some countries here, the influence operations happening, online censorship, attacks on human rights defenders, etc. And it is important that we work together as a group, as a network or a coalition, in order to engage targeted actors in order to have our voices in the region heard, and so that policies as well, especially those that pertain to the region, can be worked out and discussed with big tech and other ICT companies.
So thank you, Lisa. So we hear from all the speakers about problems, what happening on ground. We heard about the restrictive regulation, disinformation, IO or influence operation, the unclear people who works on the content moderation from the platform, offer moderating problems, online gender-based violence. We all know this problem happening, but this is something that probably not the same with what happened in the rest of the world, and we need to talk to the tech company to understand that we have to tackle this problem together. So my question now to Professor Park: do you have how to solve how the civil society and tech companies can work together to tackle these problems, and especially how to tackle problems when one of the problems is the censorship from the state? So the floor is yours. I'll give you 8 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Professor.
I'm gonna try to be really brief. So Damar, you can say a few things as well. So
because if we're going to start.
So internet was on the side of democracy. So back in 2010, 11, there was a movement to nominate internet for Nobel Peace Prize, if you remember. But anti-democratic forces began to learn to use the internet. So the question, came up, like, what to do with this? Do we continue to provide? Do you continue to play the passive role of providing the platform for everybody to speak, or do we take more active role of taking the side of democracy? And I think that we need to take the side of democracy in Southeast Asia, where, especially in Southeast Asia, where there is a rise of administrative censorship by the governments that are becoming more and more authoritarian. And in order to do that, we need to be able to not just push back on censorship, but also demand benevolent censorship, demand more takedown of especially those social media trolls. Benevolent censorship from the tech companies, not from the government, but from the tech companies, especially against the social media trolls that are often aligned with the government, who are using the trolls to continue their regime to suppress dissident voices. In order to do that, one international legal norm that we can refer to is a Rabat Plan of Action, which asks us to look at these 3 factors and then run almost 100% harm-based standard. Context, intent of the speaker, and status of the speaker, and the text, that's the content, and reach of the speech, that means how far the speech travels, and also the likelihood and imminence of harm. So in the final analysis, if there is a harm that's being caused by the speech, the tech companies should look into moderating them. Now, one model that I think we need to look at is Twitter's, now it's called X, Twitter's Trust and Safety Council. In terms of process, it was compared to the trusted flagger system, Trust and Safety Council had a more stable, lasting membership, where 40 organizations had 70 people altogether, like 110 people periodically met and were given updates on changes in the Twitter's community guidelines. Not just that, they were updated on the experiments that the Twitter was doing on new community guideline and brought back the result of the experiment to receive feedback from the members of the Trust and Safety Council. On the side, there was a crisis response hotline, and the members were listed publicly and updated regularly so that people could apply, well, people could talk to those members to have access to the council. And through this process, so far I talked about procedure. In terms of substance, there were these community guidelines that did not exist in Facebook or YouTube. For instance, the guideline of solving the public conversation. This did not take down the contents, but it suppressed, or it de-amplified the reach of the postings if the account doesn't have a confirmed email address, and if the same person signs up multiple accounts for the postings and accounts that accounts that show behavior indicating coordinated attack. For these postings, they didn't take down. They just de-amplified so that the postings can be viewed only when the viewers take extra step. Hateful conduct policy also was something more affirmative, something more proactive than the community guidelines of Facebook or YouTube, where the protected category was broadened to include the membership in an identifiable group. Now, the members of Trust and Safety Council, including me, pushed back on that. So it did broaden beyond the legal definition of hate speech, but it was withdrawn from the definition, the group definition called all identifiable groups. So a compromise was made in between, and on a harm-based analysis, the protected groups, the groups that are not protected by the usual international law on hate speech, can also be harmed through hate speech. I mean, close to home, the victims of Sewol Ferry in Korea or the Itaewon Stampede, I think this can be also protected groups under the hateful conduct, under this guideline. Political advertising is another, where the contents were not taken down, but were also de-amplified. So I'm going to wrap up.
1 minute, please.
Yeah, sure, I'm going to wrap up. I think the platform should not try to emulate what the government does. The government comes into power through election or coup d'etat or whatever. And they come with the ideology. They come with these promises to the people that they'll create some new world. Now, the platforms can be much more pragmatic. It can maintain their focus on whether harms are created, and deprioritizing certain content, de-amplifying some content. All these moderation activities can be part of the product. So that's what we felt when we went to Trust and Safety Council meeting, that we were actually helping Twitter develop a product, a product which is a platform that was family friendly and that was more supportive of civic discourse. So we want to use CCPN to we want to use CCPN to revive this alliance with the tech to make the platform work for democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Park. This is very unlikely. I cannot open question and answer session, but I think we'll close closing this session with anything that we can do now in the Southeast Asia, whether we ask for the platform accountability on transparency, digital literacy, and also responsible platform governance. There are critical components. We have to move forward to a safer and more responsible digital landscape. But I think in the future, all of this can be happen if we harness everything for the benefit of digital age, and also mitigating the risk to our societies and democracies. I'm closing this session, and I hope this all this sharing session and also ideas can be discussed over the coffee break, or we can write to each other, and also all of you coming from the Southeast Asia can connect with the Southeast Asia Collaborative Policy Network. Thank you so much. Thank you.
A reminder that since we didn't have a Q&A for this particular session, go to comment.aprigf.asia. You'll be able to find the paragraph for this session. And if you have questions, you can put it there and we can send it over to the organizers so they can answer your questions. Up next in the same room, starting at 10:10 is unpacking stakeholder engagement with the private sector. Please stay in the room or definitely come back if you want to grab a coffee.
Recording stopped.
So if there's any questions, we will send it to you. Yes, okay.
Recording in progress.
Thank you very much. No, sorry for the technical difficulties this morning. Hi, Chair, are you? Yes, you will be the one. I'm channeling guy. Okay, perfect. So can we be able to have the we will have it this time. Yeah. You know it. But after that, I mean, generally good. Good busy. Okay, hope it's a good idea. Thanks.
Are you a love cat?
Yes, like you.
Just like me.
Just like you. The big
Challenging.
Come and join me.
It's so like very awkward.
You can if we come leave. But Gaia will be on time.
Really?
Yeah.
Somehow this one is related to the
Hi, can you hear me? Hi, can you hear me and see me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, hello. Gaia, can I trouble you to rename yourself on Zoom? If not, then we can help you rename yourself, Gaia. Can you hear us? Gaia, are you able to unmute and speak?
Yeah, sorry, what did you want me to rename?
Just your name on Zoom. If you're not able to do that, we're happy to help you rename as well.
No, but it is my name. What did you want my full name, is it?
Yes, if that's possible. But if you're
Okay.
uncomfortable with that, that's also okay. Thank you, Gaia.
Nah, I'm fine with my name or full name.
When you want to open the Q&A, just cue me because this is the only mic and I'll run for you. I'll be your mic runner.
We can actually have our sort of first slide and sort of up there together. Have some sort of like this. Does that work?
If she's sharing, her picture is very small. We help her, you can have her. Big, and then I can just, yeah, if you tell, just tell her to, yes. Gaia, if you can hear us, we have your presentation and we have it on the in-room.
Yes.
And if you tell us next slide, we can drive it for you. So then we can have your lovely face greeting us much bigger than if you sharing and your face will be very, very small and we can't see you. Is that better for you?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. And you must have chat there. So she
Chat
should,
is there, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, chat.
Hello.
Thank you. Over to you whenever you want to start.
Yes, Gaia. Okay. We are 1 minute after the start, but maybe we'll wait a couple more minutes just to see if there's any more people coming. Thank you. Sure. Okay. Okay, welcome. Welcome. I'm sort of like putting you on the spot there, but welcome everyone. I hope more people will join us, but I think let's start because the hour really goes fast. So hello everybody. This session is organized by the Business and Human Rights Resource Center with the Association for Progressive Communications. What we want to do is to unpack stakeholder engagement with technology companies from experiences here in the region. So I'm Chat Garcia Ramelo, I'm from APC, and online is Gayatri Kandaday, who is the head of technology and human rights at the Business and Human Rights Resource Center. So Gaya really is the one who's put a lot of thought in organizing this meeting, but unfortunately she cannot join us because of some visa difficulties. So for the next hour, we will have a discussion of experiences and impressions we and others, which Gaia will share with us, of talking to tech companies towards making changes and on concerns relating to human rights, violations caused or contributed to by them. This is a critical process through which companies can better understand the impacts and a step in the cycle of hopefully better corporate accountability. So really what we want to do is have time to talk to each other, share, and I would like to invite you all to talk about your experiences, expectations, any interaction with companies in your context. And by the end, hopefully we could get a better sense of how we can engage more with the companies in a more useful way, as well as, of course, to look at what the challenges are to make this, to enabling stakeholder engagement, and to look at a few recommendations for what we can do to improve dialogue. So it's really a workshop. This workshop, it will only be meaningful if we participate and share. So I want to do that right off the bat. So in the spirit of multi-stakeholder engagement, which has been, if you've been attending most of the sessions, is that it's been the buzzword of the forum, right? I want to ask you who is in the room, right? Stakeholder groups. So let's see, from civil society. Okay, we have Gaia, we have 4. Gaia's online, so we have 4 people from civil society. Anybody from tech companies here? Oh, great, 2. Waving at each other, great. Okay, anybody else tech from technical community, from private sector? Private sector? All right, great. You are our soul, is it? Okay, no, good. So maybe we can begin if anybody would like now to just give us, just for a few minutes, to tell us, one, if you have any experience with working with tech companies or having problems or reporting, engaging. So let's hear that from your perspective, from your context. So let me invite you to do that. I can do this. It's okay. Yeah, I can walk around. It's good for. So anyone with any experience who wants to share to begin the conversation. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So my name is Damar. I'm my organization, SafeNet, is a trusted flagger for the tech companies. But we have problems with this trusted flagger system. We know that we use this trusted flagger for the emergency channel. So whenever we have cases like the online gender-based violence and also digital attacks, then we use this emergency channel to talk to the tech platform. But the thing is, when we talk to the tech platform, we always face the policy person, the person who is not able to do immediately, but they are only like a person who will escalate the report from us to the headquarters. And it takes so long, like, I don't know to be precise, but it's not like in 24 hours. Probably we have to wait for days or week. And in terms of saving the victims from the digital attacks or online gender-based violence is too long for them, because what we face is the victim often try to kill themselves. They have tendency to doing violence against her body, and also because they cannot suffer too much for the digital attacks. This is something that raising concern because the emergency channel actually not that emergency in reality. Thank you.
Thanks, Amar. That's really a very important, critical example. One more? Any other example? Yes, thanks.
Good morning, everyone. We come from Taiwan and we are the government agency. So we just regulate the internet, try to have internet governance. And in Taiwan, we promulgate a bill for like European, the Digital Service Act. But for the public, there are different opinions. They worry about the government will control too much. And as for the question, when we deal with tech company, we want them to increase their transparency, but they told us that there is no law, so they don't want to follow us. Or if you want to contact to the big company like Google or Meta, you need to send email to America in California, and because they don't have the legal office in Taiwan local area. So that's our difficulty. And in the previous session, when we talk about notice and take down, this is the same situation happening in Taiwan, but we try to enforce the law, and especially for the child abuse and non-consensual images. So those are follow the process, and we try to deal with the tech company. And when we have a real law, they have more intendance to follow our process. So I think we are trying on the process at the same way with other countries. Those are our experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both for starting us off. And we will have more opportunity to share and to reflect. But and this really starts us off, and I would now like to invite Gaia to share their experience from the business and human rights and the research that they've done. And then from there, we can have much more discussion. So Gaia, do you want to, yes, you want to start? Yeah. Okay. Tell me when you want me to move the slide, okay?
Yes, thank you. But before I proceed any further, I wanted to say that I'm really glad that APrIGF remains a truly multi-stakeholder platform, and I'm glad we are able to have this conversation at APrIGF. I'm terribly sorry that I'm not able to be with you in person, but it's 4:20 in the morning right now, so I'm going to do my absolute best to make sense and remain coherent at this hour. I'm glad I'm at least able to join you online, but really I wanted to thank Chat for stepping in and really helping us do this session, given that I wasn't able to make it. Chat, if you could please go to the first slide. I just wanted to quickly note that this conversation is really not meant to be sort of unidirectional. It's for us to be able to foster this conversation within the room and to be able to see how we can have this conversation with the larger APrIGF community and the broader actors within the region. So please, the participants online, if you feel like if there's any point, if you're able to jump in, please do. You can leave your comments online and I'll try and address them. Now, stakeholder engagement is such a critical part of the cycle of corporate accountability or even a cycle of corporate awareness, I would say. Broadly, I feel that stakeholder engagement, which is a process through which companies engage with different stakeholders, be it employees, be it people within different structures in the management or the workforce, engaging with their own suppliers or the people that they provide their products and services to, people who are impacted directly or indirectly by this, gender groups and groups that have expertise on that, and civil society. This is the process of stakeholder engagement. And a big part of that is also government representatives, technical community, all of these, right? It of course varies from scenario to scenario, but it's really important to have that kind of broad stakeholder engagement. What is the stakeholder engagement towards? Stakeholder engagement is really towards a broader process of human rights and environmental due diligence usually, which is a process through which companies are able to demonstrate that they know and show the human rights impact that they have, right? Because the private sector is such an integral part of the digital ecosystem. Driving innovation has been how we've been able to really kind of harness the power of ICTs. But it's an unmissable truth that in addition to all the positive impacts that tech companies have in our ability to enjoy human rights, there are several concerns about the negative impact that companies either directly cause, contribute to, or in some way linked to, especially in the global south and the region we operate out of. So stakeholder engagement essentially enables a process through which the wider communities are able to forewarn companies about actual or potential harms or impacts that their products, services, operations, or even simply the landscape within which a company exists. As much as it's a beneficial process for civil society, for communities to be able to engage with companies, it's also a truly valuable process for companies to get an understanding, which they otherwise would have had to rely on others to provide for them. This is a first, account of the impacts and possible impacts that companies can have. So it's a really critical process in that sense. The second key aspect of it is that it builds trust between companies and governments, between companies and different communities with civil society, their users, to be able to garner the social license for companies to operate. But I would say that, again, going back to the point that I was making earlier about forewarning, it really helps prevent a harm before it happens. And by preventing the harm before it happens, I'm not only talking about business harm, which is, legal, financial, reputational risks for companies as a result of human rights violations. It also helps prevent harms to the communities themselves. So we're not left in a situation where we feel like, well, we could not have foreseen this kind of negative repercussions of a particular piece of technology or how it's used. And when we're talking about tech companies, as of course, they're not a monolithic entity. There are different kinds of tech companies, and these companies operate differently, and their uptake and demonstration of human rights commitments are also accordingly different, right? Chat, could you please help me move to the next slide? Perfect, thank you. What we did, sorry, there's a slide in between that's missing. Can you check if maybe there's a slide before this? No? Okay, what I'll do is let me share a link here. Maybe in your version. It's probably missing, but that's okay. Don't worry about it. I'm just sharing a link here. This is a link to a research that the Resource Center carried out with the support of several organizations, including APC. It's called Dismantling the Facade, a Global South Perspective on the State of Engagement with Tech Companies. And what we did was that over a period of about a year or so, we spoke to 40 different or more actors who are based in about 11 odd countries or more, really, in terms of their own experiences with stakeholder engagement. And the reason why we decided to do a Global South perspective is that over the course of those conversations, we realized that the Global North, or more particularly the US, Europe experience of digital defenders speaking to companies was vastly different from the kind of challenges that the Global South colleagues of ours were having in terms of being able to talk to companies, but also get the results that we are hoping for. What's very interesting is that the sharing that we had from Damar and my colleague from Taiwan confirms some of the challenges that we were able to capture over the course of the research. What we also did was try and showcase 3 examples or 3 case studies from the Global South of ways in which our communities are currently engaging and advocating for corporate accountability in the tech sector. Now, what are the challenges, right? In terms of the biggest challenge that was reported was the opaqueness of business practices. And this was also pointed out when we just had this conversation before this. It's been very difficult to get data from companies. What's available on their website isn't always very specific enough. Their reports, very few companies put out human rights impact assessment or due diligence reports. Very few companies provide transparency reports. It's been very difficult to get data out of companies. And it's not only social media platforms, it's surveillance companies, all of these different companies that have different kinds of impacts on our rights. So given that their business practices, the decision-making around policies have been so opaque, it's also been very difficult for us to pinpoint where the problem is. We're able to pinpoint that a company's services are problematic or products are problematic, but because we don't have enough access to their data or information, it's been challenging. One of the core responsibilities of the Resource Center, the Business and Human Rights Resource Center, has been reaching out to tech companies. So what we do is that on a daily basis, the Business and Human Rights Resource Center tracks about 10,000 odd companies that are split up across different sectors: garment, tea, food and beverages, to name a few, right? And one of the sectors that we closely follow is also the tech sector. What we essentially do is that we sift through information online from civil society and media about human rights violation-related allegations that are made against companies. When companies have not made a public response to an allegation, we write to them asking them to respond and provide a response. We make their response and non-response public. What we've noticed is that the tech sector has an interestingly lower rate of response than, say, when you compare it to the apparel sector. The rate of response of the tech sector to our questions or allegation letters is more or less on par with oil and gas companies or natural resources extraction related companies, right? Now, that sector, natural resources, is infamous for being really, really opaque. At the moment, our data reflects that the tech companies, the technology sector is more or less on par with that. They're definitely not nearly as responsive as the agriculture sector or the garment sector, which are, some of the more responsive sectors in terms of responding to allegations from civil society. So that is, I think, an interesting data point that demonstrates that the sector as such remains quite opaque. Now, coming to another big challenge, which Damar pointed out, is inaccessible company structures. In most cases, our colleagues are left with only access to the public policy team, which often lacks the decision-making abilities, as was pointed out, nor are they able to fully explain or take back the solutions that we are looking for, right? In a lot of cases, if we think about it, it's the marketing team that might be problematic, or it could have been the design team that has the solution or has a better understanding of the problem. But the thing is, we don't have access to them. And oftentimes, we don't have access to anybody beyond the public policy team, which means that it's very unlikely that we're able to talk to the CEO or the COO. Very rarely we'd be able to reach at that point, right? And this also means that we don't have a very clear understanding of the board of these companies, and then ultimately we are also not then able to reach out to different pressure points for a company, like for example investors. Now that points to another challenge that's more internal. Limited capacity was pointed out repeatedly as one of the big challenges why the digital rights community is not able to push as strongly on corporate accountability in the tech sector, which is because our resources are so thin that monitoring and doing advocacy, for example, with governments already takes up so much time that we don't necessarily have the expertise to be able to understand or showcase how a company works or how a particular company works, because those require access to specialized databases in a lot of cases, and also sort of different spaces in terms of business and human rights, which we don't always have access to. Another interesting challenge that was pointed out, but this time more related to the internal workings of a company, is that there's often lack of whistleblower protection, which means that people working within companies are often the only source we have to expose company practices. But when they do so, they face significant legal, financial, emotional, even in some cases physical harm, right? And there's really no protection for them. Oftentimes, most tech employees, especially in big tech, are forced to sign non-disclosure agreements, which prevents them from being able to disclose information which is critical for our understanding of how human rights are impacted. The last basket of challenge that was pointed out was discriminatory practices, which goes back to why we decided to focus on the global south, is that there is definitely undertones of racism in terms of who gets access to whom in terms of tech companies. Our US and Eurocentric colleagues are definitely in a much better position. Well, one could argue that it could be because these companies are domiciled there, right? But that's not always the case. Even when these companies have local offices, it's very difficult for us to get access to decision-making bodies within these companies. Information is probably more openly shared with Global North groups than Global South groups, even for research purposes. So all of these kind of set out some of the key challenges. Chat, could you please help go to the next slide?
Yeah, few more minutes. Yeah?
Yes. And broadly, what we've noticed as strategies is that civil society has been using different ways, right? It could be by talking to companies, participating in the human rights and environmental due diligence work. It could be through doing rankings, which has become very important. In fact, one of our colleagues, Derechos Digitales in Chile, they put out consistent ranking on privacy practices of companies. And then we've seen a very important role of campaigning, of maintaining evidence, as our colleagues in Myanmar have been able to demonstrate how close ties with the media, using the UN, all of these different platforms, sometimes leads to positive results. Another really important strategy that we've been following is essentially what we're doing right now, which is inviting tech companies to be a part of meetings that we are involved in, or we are hosting in another case, it was what we host, but these sort of multi-stakeholder processes. But all of the other traditional methods of going to court, advocating for better laws, participating in human rights and environmental due diligence, doing research, exposing practices, we've been doing all of these as broad strategies. In some cases, they've resulted in positive impacts. In some cases, there haven't really been any major responses. Let me go to the last part of my presentation. Chat, could you please go to the next slide? Yes. So to help us with our push for corporate accountability, there are different sort of mechanisms, tools that we've had, right? One of the tools that I'm personally involved with is the tech company dashboard that the resource center maintains. And let me quickly give you the link to that here, because what we do with the tech company dashboard is that we consistently track about 81 tech companies at the moment. So you'll be able to get access to information about the broad company structure, etc. And then there are rankings such as ranking digital rights, or the one that I mentioned by Derecho Digitales, but there are also other broad multi-sector rankings, CBHR rankings that you can take a look at. The company's websites are a really important resource, and then the reports that they put out are also extremely important, including the environmental and human rights due diligence reports. At the moment, the key source of understanding the human rights problems posed by companies has been civil society reports and media reporting. Let me pause there, because the next part is really about recommendations, but I would like to come back to that towards the end. Back to you, chat. I'm sorry if I overshot.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you very much, Gaia. I think you've given us a really good overview of what the research you've done. So for the next 20 minutes, what I would like us to do is, one, if you have questions for Gaia, but also if you have, does any of this resonate with you, the experiences or any challenges that were shared? Was in your experience, do you think this was anything that's missing from what Gaia was sharing that we need to, take into account? And have you had any success, if any, like, happy experiences with this engagement? Will be also a good thing to talk about. Any successful strategies? So these are some of the questions that I'd like to pose to you. And I'll come to the floor, because will save us time. So yeah, and any questions you have for Gaia. She says 81. I was going to ask you, Gaia, how many companies, and she was saying 81 companies they're monitoring, but there are many more companies, I suppose, that we can monitor. So anyone want to start? Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Gaia. Thank you, Chet. My name is Deborah. I'm from Indonesia, Tifa Foundation. So this session was actually related to the previous session in this room as well, around content moderation and platform accountability. So my question would be related to my observation that the focus when we talk about corporate accountability, platform accountability, we often talk about the big techs, but national and local ISPs and telcos are also part of the problem. And even though there has been a lot of transnational efforts and national efforts to push for the accountability of big tech, but local and national ISPs, they are really compelled to follow the national laws of the country. So my question would be, what would be the strategy or maybe successful experience of engaging with these national ISPs in countering notice and takedown and notice and shutdown orders from the government, for example? And I am aware that there has been a research done by Ranking Digital Rights with a civil society organization in Indonesia in ranking telcos in terms of their adherence to the guidelines of business and human rights. But I think even though the research is there, data is there, the question would be, how do we use this data to actually advocate for more transparency and accountability, and also more engagement from the ISPs with the civil society? Thank you.
Thank you. Let me quickly respond to that, chat. I think it's a really, really critical point to note that it's not only the big tech companies that we need to be following, right? In fact, that's how my program works, is that I'm personally not as invested in I mean, not that it's not important. Big tech companies have big impacts, no doubt. But I feel that the medium and smaller companies are actually, and national companies are probably more important to me personally, because they are the evolving ones, right? So then you have a greater chance of helping inform their ethics, their values, and how they are going to as a business. So what we did, just as an explanation, is that initially we picked 40 big companies. This was 2 years back. Over the last year and a half, we've added 41 companies, which are more sort of the next 41 in a sense, emerging companies. That was a conscious decision. And this year, we're adding 15 African-based companies to this list of 81. So we'll have 96. So we are hoping that going forward the next year, especially the first quarter of next year, I would really love to add Asia-based companies. And if anybody would like to inform or help inform which companies it is that need to go into that list, I'll be more than happy to do that. Then we can consistently track the performance of those companies. In terms of the question around ISPs and the responsibility to follow national law, I think the guide really sort of the international standard at the moment on corporate accountability is the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. And what the Guiding Principles tells us is that companies cannot simply just say that we have to follow the national law. They are under an obligation to do everything they can to follow the international standard. This is a piece of research we put out more specifically on internet shutdowns and what it is that we expect from tech companies and ISPs. What you would be very interested to know is that we sent out a survey. This is Africa, of course, focused, this report. We sent a survey, and I think it was to 22 companies, but I could be wrong about the exact figure of companies that we sent it to. None of them wrote back to tell us that they had human rights policies, which means that most ISPs don't necessarily have a very significant human rights policy that they base their decisions on to start with. And we've put out our expectations from ISPs and other tech companies when it comes to internet shutdowns. And I'm happy to see if you would like to take a look at that and replicate it for Asia. Yeah.
Thank you, Gaia. So anybody else wants to, yes?
Hello, Brent Carey for the record. I just had a question. I'm the chair of New Zealand's online safety code of practice for online harms. And in that code of practice, we have a human rights-based approach. And I was wondering, given how many codes of practice are being written currently around the world, whether you've got any views or any research that you can point to on where you think codes of practice with a rights-based approach might be working or not, or if it might just be too early.
No, that's such an interesting question. And in fact, this came up in another meeting where I was discussing this exact topic about how there are, several parallel processes at the moment on different topics, whether it's with UNESCO, and then there is, different initiatives with GNI, and then you have the Christchurch initiative. There are multiple initiatives that are ongoing, trying to hold tech companies accountable. Now, in my personal view is that this is the cycle of evolution of corporate accountability in different sectors. If we look at the garment sector, for instance, we had the Rana Plaza Accord. We had multiple different accords over a period of time. Some of these processes will survive. Some of these processes will eventually fall off. But we just have to attempt it. But to your question of what's the analysis, I think it's actually a really good research question, and it's come up already multiple times. So thank you for flagging it. Perhaps it's something I'll do a little bit of writing with my team on next year, possibly early next year. But it's definitely something that we need to understand more. What are the multi-stakeholder initiatives at the moment? What's working? In what spaces are tech companies being more responsive? But yeah, thank you for asking that.
Thanks. More? Any other experience questions here?
Hi, I'm Rafiq Copeland from Internews here. I just wanted to say, first of all, thanks for the great session, really important topic. Similar to Damar, Internews, we're part of a number of different trusted flagger programs. We've worked, we've pursued a policy of engagement with the big tech companies, worked very closely, particularly with Meta. We recently published a report on Meta's trusted flagger program, where we spoke to trusted partners all around the world, including a number of partners in the Asia Pacific region. What we found was that there was huge frustration with that program in terms of the response times. It would often take weeks and often months to get a response. I think the record we had one was 8 months for a report around incitement to violence, which is obviously too long. And there were a lot of real feelings that despite the level of engagement, even when partners were invited to consultations and things like that, that they were just not being listened to. And then the companies would say that they'd done the engagement, and actually publicly, when they were criticised, say, "Oh, we're working with our trusted partners or our local partners," and then the partners would be saying, "Hang on, but we told them not to do that thing that they did," and there's a really strong feeling that people were being gaslit. So my question, I do have a question. My question is around beyond kind of principles or codes of practice, whether there's a role for kind of regulation or specific best practices when it comes to the kind of details of how these engagements happen. And I know that there's trusted flag, as I mentioned in the DSA, for example, there's some guidance around there, but that seems to be focusing actually on the trusted partners themselves and worrying that maybe they have too much power rather than the role of the platforms in actually listening to those. So yeah, wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
No, that's an excellent question, because really, if we think about it, as such, in the Asia Pacific region, when it comes to labor laws, when it comes to corporate accountability or using consumer protection laws, there's varying degrees of what's effective, what's not. In some countries, you have a better regimes in terms of better regime in the sense regime for corporate accountability, and in some cases we don't. And then there is weaknesses related to courts. But there is unescapably a big gap in terms of coherent policy making when it comes to tech companies. There is sort of a knee-jerk reaction. Every time there's a problem, then you have a law addressing a particular problem rather than addressing the broader question of what is expected from tech companies. I don't think that, for example, there are strong enough national action plans from the UN guiding principles on business and human rights currently within Asia. It's not Asia Pacific region. It's not a very even space to start with. I would say really in terms of the key piece of legislation that we need to focus on and perhaps really push for is something on the lines of what Europe is currently considering, which is the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, where the EU has made it clear that they are expecting companies to conduct human rights and environmental due diligence. Now, in Asia, we do have some examples. For example, for instance, Japan is currently, they came out with the policy guidelines requiring companies. In fact, it's one of the very few countries that had human rights and environmental due diligence policy that refer to technology companies in some way, shape, or form. I think it's really important that that's the first step, is that once we get companies to routinely and periodically do human rights and environmental due diligence, they will have to demonstrate that A, they spoke to different communities, B, that they understand and know what their harms that they're likely to cause. So I think that's where I would start. But definitely in the research also, we talked about, we've looked at instances where companies have been held liable before courts, before OECD, for instance, or at least attempted to be held liable. We haven't explored that enough. In the last section about recommendations, we'll go back to that about how to leverage strategic litigation, perhaps, to hold companies materially liable for what they have done or not done.
Thanks, Gaia. Gaia, how do you make what does it take to convince a government to do a national? I suppose the question here is, how do you make companies do that? Does the state have a role in making that happen? Sorry, yeah. Sorry to take the
Yes.
mic and ask the question, but I just wanted to follow that
it's
up.
a great question. Are you asking about human rights and environmental due diligence?
Yeah, no, I think you were saying that companies, that's the first step that companies need
Yes.
to do is
Yes.
to do this plan. So is there a state
Yeah.
responsibility there? Or is it just companies saying, yes, we're going to do this? I think that's my question.
You know what's interesting, Chat, is that because human rights and environmental due diligence, HRDD, I'm going to call it that for now that we established it, has become sort of, especially for transnational companies, several countries are now requiring companies to do that. So those that are domiciled in Europe are starting to do it anyway, slowly. But it's really the state's responsibility to say, look, if you want to operate in my country, if you want to make money out of your operations in my country, you've got to do human rights and environmental due diligence just as much as you do financial due diligence, just as much as you do labor due diligence, right? One other very interesting point, Chat, is that one of the pressure points is investors, because investors are also becoming now jittery about their investments and then getting caught up in legal battles, reputational battles. So investors are also asking companies to do human rights and environmental due diligence. So that's another avenue to pressure is states, investors, and companies. We've got to target them differently, but really states are best positioned to make companies do this.
Okay, thank you. So we have about 5-10 more minutes. Any other question or experience you want to share from the floor here? Yes.
Thanks so much for your presentation, and the discussion's really interesting. My name is Sam. I'm just curious, I've done a little bit of work in, I guess, activism related to the extractive industries, and they are incredibly opaque. Their basic strategy is not to engage. Now, tech companies from a PR perspective do engage, but I'm just wondering, is it public relations? I mean, we know that, it's the assumption that we're making that tech companies want to do the right thing, the correct starting point.
Okay, so I mean, if I use a purely activist hat, of course, that's what I'm tempted to say is that, look, all of this is just PR and all. It's true. In some cases, it is true because you get frustrated with the responses. But the thing is, I do see several instances where tech companies have really tried to understand the problems of their practices and address them as well. So there are positive examples too. But what I would say is that, and perhaps, Chad, this links to how do we move forward from here, right? I think the biggest thing is we have to overcome this trust deficit where there's definitely a perception, even if we don't want to say reality, that there is not enough genuine engagement and there's not, it becomes unidirectional. And that trust deficit and lack of social license to operate is something that tech companies have to resolve. They do have to resolve because even from a business perspective, the fact simply remains that the companies that last are companies that are value companies, that are value-based companies, that are companies that truly are respected by their stakeholders, right? The buyers, their consumers, their employees. To get that kind of respect, you do need to be able to overcome this trust deficit that's there at the moment, even from a pure financial perspective. So with that in mind, I would say that when we did the research, it was very quite clear that the major recommendations were around 4 factors. And maybe if someone can pull up the second last slide, but it's really just, very quickly I could point it out. But if you can't, it's totally fine as well. I think the major sort of recommendation that came up is that we need to do evidence building. For instance, my colleague just mentioned that extractive experience in the extractive industry, right? Now, what is interesting is that when it comes to extractive industry, tobacco, oil, gas, there is a history of consistent evidence building where groups are focused on consistently recording the activities and the impacts of these companies. We are, of course, doing it as well, but then my opinion is that it's a little bit sporadic and not always very consistent. So we need to consistently build evidence and we need to look at other movements and look at how anti-tobacco activists went about it, or how other corporate accountability activists went about their evidence collection and try to replicate some of it. And we do need to build a capacity, then reach out to other movements to try and see how we can build a capacity around different strategies, right? One of the interesting things is that there's unlike other sectors in the tech sector, there's not a sufficient link between tech workers and digital rights groups for many reasons, right? Like I said, there's lack of whistleblower protection. There's also mistrust because, obviously these are people who contributed to the problem itself and are not always just victims, But we need to build that capacity to reach across and also speak to the different workers and tech companies. There's certainly a sense that there's lack of coordination. There's not enough coordinated campaign or coordinated research or coordinated advocacy efforts, which includes even speaking to companies, because sometimes what happens is there are 7 parallel conversations that are happening with companies and civil society, and in many cases, civil society is not in a position to coordinate among ourselves when we are talking to the company so we can follow up. And the last issue has really been resourcing chat, because, on top of the existing challenges we have with our resources not being enough to do the existing workload, it is an additional layer of work. But I think that especially for the Asia Pacific region, where sometimes we have real challenges with getting governments to act or act quickly enough, it's really important that companies and civil society are able to build a positive relationship where companies are able to more willingly respond to our concerns. But these are sort of just broad recommendations. I would love to hear if anybody else has observations on what really needs to happen now to strengthen our corporate accountability movement.
That's a good segue question to the floor to see, okay, are there any, from what you've heard, insights? Do you think there's anything that we can add to, even if this is just first steps? I think what I heard earlier is that in the region, there's not really there needs to be more research. There needs to be much more information. We need a hit list. No, I was thinking in my head, you wanted like more. No, I'm joking, okay? We need a list of companies that we want to monitor in the region, that we need to monitor in the region because they matter, right? They do. So maybe that's one thing to think of, to look at. So I'll start with that, but anything else that you are thinking about?
Brent Carey. One thing I thought about was when you talked about trusted flagger. Trusted flagger means different things to different platforms. And the colleague that shared the example of the delay. So I wonder if there is something that we can do in relation to some consensus or commonality around some guiding principles in the trusted flagger program across platform, like timeliness of response, escalation of harm, like incitement to violence or incitement to suicide, way more harmful than perhaps an impersonation scam that you might have a bit more time. So I just wondered practically whether getting something around what a trusted program might mean. It may be already be done, but I just wondered if that was something to do.
Yes, please. Yes, anything else in addition that we can you can think of, especially in already related to the work that you're doing? Yeah.
Sorry, just another question about brand. Do the platforms care or worry about, do you think, brand matters? Because with apparel industries, I guess brand does matter. Or with the tech companies, does brand come into play?
Not for Elon Musk. So sorry, I couldn't resist that. Okay, go.
No, I think that the comment from Brett about trust programs, I think one of the, and now when I kind of link it to his earlier comment, I think one of the recommendations really for us to also work on should be trying to understand the different processes that are currently available for corporate accountability in the tech sector. What are the government involved initiatives? What are the corporate propelled initiatives like the Trusted Flaggers program, and try to see, and I think that's an excellent research point, and I'm really excited. I think I'll go back and relay that to my team and see. I think we need to do a little bit more analysis of how these different programs are working, and possibly governments might be in a good position to guide companies on the question of, a little bit more practicalities on how this needs to happen, privacy around it and all of that. The question on brand goes back to the comment I was trying to make, is that when we look at traditional companies, so to speak, traditional companies, they've built their brands over decades, right? Most tech companies are possibly at most 30 years old, or 30 to 40 years old at most, right? So it's still sort of in a young stage. I would say that the brand consciousness is probably more with some of the older, bigger tech companies. For instance, I definitely see that there are companies such as HP, Microsoft, Ericsson. These are companies that are quite conscious about harm to their reputation, that who have put in place at least publicly available quite clear human rights policies. So you can see that those companies are quite conscious about their brand and any negative associations that their brands might have. And we see that in the responses that they give us as well. When we write them, they really make their position as a brand quite clear. But that's the point we need to drive home, is that tech companies need to build brands that would last, and then that's what investors should ideally be interested in. But the fact is, the tech sector is sort of at the moment still going through that quick revenue, quick turnover sort of model, which the coal industry, the railways industry, the tobacco industry went through in a different phase of its cycle. So it's also investors who are pushing quick returns as an issue, which of course ultimately will impact the brand value.
Thanks, Gaia.
But Chat,
yeah.
I just wanted to make one quick one other quick observation, and I'll stop with that. I really do believe that companies have a very important role, positive role that they can play here. I think it'll be great to hear from companies what it is that they need help with, what it is that will be most helpful for them to hear from us, what data they need, in addition to what they should be gathering themselves. So I would also invite tech companies to help us understand how to improve stakeholder engagement with them.
Yeah, we have to get them in the room first. I know that's the thing. But I think yes, sorry. Yes, no, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Chad, I didn't mean to steal the mic. Hi, Guy. Hi, everyone. I'm Cheryl Cito from Meta, and listening with a lot of interest to all of the comments. And Brent, really appreciate your thoughts on some more, I think, robust conversations between the tech platforms and the trusted flaggers. So I think there are a lot of things that we could do to maybe come into a room together and talk about what you guys aren't getting from us, but also what we need to be able to better triage. There is a huge volume of stuff that does come up to us, and some of it, as Brent said, is not necessarily as time critical or going to lead to imminent real world harm. And so I think being able to talk together about how we can help you guys triage things so that we're getting as high quality reporting as possible, that then can enable us to be as responsive to the right types of escalations. So for example, a flagger coming to us and saying, can you please look at this urgently because the person who's raised it is really angry. That doesn't necessarily mean that there is harm involved in that particular case. And so we need to then make a decision as to what we should and shouldn't be triaging and what we should and shouldn't be prioritizing. So I think there is a lot that we can do together to try and make these processes more efficient and more effective for everybody, to ultimately lead to better experiences for people when they come online. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? think there was one other company. I don't want to put you in a spot, but is there anybody else? Yes.
Thanks. This is just a comment in terms of how we could maybe get people, the right people into the room to kind of discuss things, which and then create that sort of sense that this is a common interest. In Australia, we have industry codes of practice, which are developed with community, government, it's registered with government. And as you all probably know, it sets out community standards in terms of content. And then there is a sort of an accountability element there too, in terms of, you know, if you don't comply, there is a little bit of a stick somewhere along the line that could be wielded against you. So that's, you know, just a thought whether something like that could be kind of developed or massaged into kind of a practical outcome.
Look, we have 55 seconds, but we can have 5 more minutes. So I'll give the mic to you.
Look, I'm just being really cheeky here, but I just wanted to push back against the comment from Meta there about the volume of you know, poor quality reporting being an issue. And I know that poor quality reporting is a huge issue, but according to the numbers provided by Meta, there's only 1,000 reports a month submitted through the Trusted Partner Program, which works out at 33 a day for the whole world. So, you know, I don't think there's any reason why something can take months to get back. I don't think volume is the issue. And poor quality reporting is an issue, but I think that the only way to get better quality reporting is to engage further and, you know, better with the partners themselves. So I just wanted to kind of push back. I couldn't help myself from doing that. Thanks.
But it's a good, I think this is exactly what the conversation needs to happen. There are difficult issues here, obviously, right? And we're trying to build a space so that we can, in fact, talk about this, so we can move forward with, you know, with the realization that there are difficult issues and really risks. There are people who are really at risk. And I think that's the kind of thing that we keep in mind, and we're trying to find solutions to it. So thank you for raising that, and thank you for listening to it. So with that, though, I think we will close. But thank you, everybody, for really sharing. And I think it's a good conversation. We've had a good conversation. I'll give you 1 minute to sort of like tell us, Gaia, what you took from this and what you can give back and what people can expect. I'm going to put you on the spot, and then we can close. Thanks. Go ahead, Gaia.
No, thank you, Chad. Thank you so much. And I really appreciated the conversation in the room. And I am definitely walking away with ideas of what it is that we need to focus on next and what we can make available. I've shared my email address, and the last slide should have my email address, but please just text me if you'd like to have my email address. I'm happy to walk you through the tools, because the report that I shared also has resources that you could use. I'm looking forward to more conversations with Meta, with other colleagues, so that we can exchange more information and see how, for instance, Meta's first human rights report, which is really a welcome move for the industry itself, can be replicated, how it can be strengthened going forward, how industry standards can be developed, how different multi-stakeholder initiatives and guidances can be improved. There's a lot we can do together. So please feel free to reach out. Whatever I can do, I'm happy to do, but I'm sure there's a lot that we can do together. Thank you so much for taking the time to spend this hour with us, and really just please reach out if you need anything. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for coming, and have a nice break.
Thank you, everyone. Please do remember to highlight the issues that you heard in this session, or any questions you might have for Gaia in our platform. Comment.aprigf.asia. Join us at the town hall. Speak up, especially about the issues that we heard in this really good session. After the tea break, coming up in the same room, we have an interesting session called Mines, Maps, and Minerals. Trace the complex material of your smartphone to make more sustainable choices. Please enjoy your tea break.
Thank you, Chad. I really like the session. I was like,
Recording stopped.
Also, like on my personal other hat instead of being secretariat. No, it was really good.
Thank you. Yes, looking forward to it. That's how we got a lot of them to come. If you go direct to there's a lot of But this is voluntary, right? Not,
She, I don't know. Let's see. Hello? Hi, Zoom room. This is the secretariat. We see we have an online speaker for the next session. Danyashri, if you can hear us, would you like to test your video and your mic while we're in break?
Hi, absolutely. Am I audible?
I can see that your mic is moving, but we're not hearing the audio in room. I see.
How
Can
about
you
now?
speak again?
1 minute.
Yes, you're able to be heard and we can see you perfectly. Can you just say a longer sentence just to check your audio quality?
Hi, I'm Danyashri from the Pranava Institute in India.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yes, that's good. Good audio, good video, and then we'll be ready to start after the tea break. Thank you very much for the test.
Thank you so much.
I have it. It's the only one. Yep.
Mutual cooperation, like it's not
And you are. And then do we have? Okay, and we have your.
Recording in progress.
Whichever chance we will just. Appreciate that you guys got in touch with us first.
Start. Start. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the session on mines, maps, and minerals. This will be a workshop based on some of the work that we have done at the Pranava Institute, which is the New Delhi-based think tank. Right. Is this good? Perfect. Thank you. So welcome to Mines, Maps, and Minerals. I think the rather intriguing title brought some of you in. This is our work at the intersection of technology and sustainability. How do we actually engage with young people on sustainability when it comes to technological devices? That's the thinking behind this. We wanted to introduce some of the work that we've done. So in this session, a lot of this will be hands-on. I think we'll be trialing out some of this material, getting your feedback on it, getting your thoughts on it. But the idea is to introduce the Unboxing Tech Toolkit project, which is the work that we've done in creating interactive, engaging material that will help young people engage with technology and sustainability, go beyond thinking of their smartphones as just toys that they switch in and switch out every year, and as fashion statements, to thinking more deeply about what are the planetary costs, and doing it in a fun way that a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old will be able to engage with, understand, and enjoy. So we'll talk a bit about the Asia Pacific regional context, which is the sort of context for which we designed this toolkit, and situate the kind of work that we've done. Maybe try this out, get your feedback. That's broadly the flow of this session. So I think this region is very interesting when we look at youth and technology in particular. If you look at the percentage of individuals using the internet, 73% of people in the Asia Pacific using the internet are between 15 to 25. That's a huge number, and that's far higher than other regions in the world. So we're looking at a youth-led and youth-dominated internet, which also means youth-led and youth-dominated consumption of digital devices, which means that is the group that will be that should be targeted when we are looking at sustainability. We're also looking at a spike in digital adoption in both products and services and consumer interactions, which happened during COVID-19. That's the graph on the right. We're also seeing significant rise in internet usage across multiple use cases, which are again digital activities of adolescents. So we're looking at a youth-led internet across the Asia Pacific, and we're looking at a spike which has happened after COVID-19. We're also looking at a very diverse region where some parts of the region struggle with lack of digital infrastructure and digital inclusivity. Digital literacy still remains a challenge. Many people have gotten on board the internet and digital devices, but digital literacy is lagging behind. We are also looking at device penetration of varying rates, and we are also looking at an understanding of values behind technology that differ significantly across different parts of the region. So very diverse region and very diverse challenges and problems that we are looking at. The question we are looking at here is, how do we make sustainability when it comes to the technological use and device use a part of youth conversations today? What is the best way to take that forward? How do we make these conversations happen in schools, communities, and neighborhoods? How can we make young people, give young people space to discuss their digital experiences? How do we enable these conversations around the planetary costs of technology? How do we create holistic and accessible digital education? This is a gap that we noticed when we surveyed curricula of some parts of the Asia Pacific. While a lot of young people are living their lives immersed online, an average of 6 to 8 hours online, where education has been online during the pandemic and multiple critical services, social relationships are online. Their ICT curricula talk about very preliminary basic things like how to use the internet, how to use devices, and so on and so forth. The challenges of navigating a digital world where trust and safety are at the core of conversations, or the planetary costs of their device usage, some of the deeper conversations around technology, sustainability, and us is not touched in digital curricula. So you have a generation of people who are deeply immersed in digital worlds, whose parents do not quite share the same digital experiences that the adolescents share. The teachers are not familiar with it. The communities do not know what's happening. How do we help these young people navigate the internet safely, with autonomy, and with a sense of planetary responsibility? That's the thinking that animated us by looking at the Unboxing Tech Toolkit. And we believe that if we are looking at 73% of internet users as people between 15 to 25, they are the solution for sustainability. They are the solution for a more trustworthy and safe internet. How do we empower them to reimagine sustainable technological futures? How do we enable them to reimagine different technological experiences which work for the planet and work for the people involved? That is the sort of thinking that animated the Unboxing Tech Toolkit. This is the gap that we aim to address. Diksha, do you want to take on the Unboxing Tech Toolkit?
So hi, everyone, and welcome to this workshop. I hope all of you have gotten a copy of the toolkit, or else we'll take a break in a little while and share it with you so that you can see what we built. So just to share a bit more about the project itself, the Unboxing Tech Toolkit project is something we began in 2020. And our core concern was how do we empower youth for a digital age, which has now almost dropped onto them with the COVID-19 pandemic in ways that were unimagined, right? So one of the core things we wanted to do through that is, one, impart the understanding of technology as something which is embedded in the larger fabric of socio-technical systems. So technology is not a standalone thing which we just use, but in fact, it is so deeply a part of the socio-cultural fabric in which it is embedded, in which it is used, and so on. And second, owing, as Shyam mentioned, some of the issues that concern youth as well as young people in the Asia Pacific region, we wanted to touch upon technology, us, and the planet. How do we manage this relationship? And that's why the two toolkits which we have created thus far, the second of which we'll be looking at today. The first one was focused a lot around dark patterns and deceptive design, and was on the more behavioral aspect of what interaction with technology does to us, right? So why this project? This project is aimed at increasing youth awareness and encouraging them to make more sustainable technology choices. And hopefully by the end of this session, you will get a sense of how we are aiming to do that. And second is to deconstruct the deterministic view of technology and envision diverse and non-Western or plural technological futures, which are very much possible given the rich knowledge diversity that the Asia Pacific region in itself holds, right? Shyam, can we move to the next slide?
And the way we wanted to do that is essentially by creating open multimedia projects. So both the toolkits are available online, free to download. They are open to translations and adaptation within the classroom. So let's say, Japan or some other country in the region wants to take a copy, an educator wants to translate it into their language and use it. We're very, very happy to kind of do that. And I'll come in a minute to talk about why open multimedia projects are the way to build youth engagement, knowledge, and strategies instead of just looking at the textbook way of learning, which has happened so far. Right, Sham? Can we move? So we believe that the thinking behind this project has been that open multimedia resources can empower and educate. And since these toolkits combine information, graphics, activities, and tools in order to create experiences which can be enjoyed personally, in groups, or administered within classrooms or communities. So let's say you're a parent and you're interested in talking about digital issues with your child and their friends. You can very much host this within your home. You can have them come over and create a space where it can be discussed. The toolkits also include education plus reflection exercises, because a lot of digital education, we believe, does not have to be about knowing more information, right? And this is something we've also discussed in previous sessions around sustainability. We all know the abstract theories around sustainability and reduce, reuse, recycle. But what's more important is things which can help us reflect as well as practically apply this into our daily lives, right? Third is topics which are not included generally in the educational paradigm. And for this, we actually did a survey of sorts of the digital curriculum across different countries and found that most of it was quite outdated and was not talking about these issues at all. So we want to pick up themes which do not find space in the current paradigm, and finally help them deconstruct notions of technology which have just come on very quickly and taken over as the larger narrative through which we understand. Can we move to the next slide? So very quickly, these are the two toolkits which we created. First is the design did it, not me. And that's essentially to understand how technology shapes our behavior and what we must do to gain that sort of control back. The second one, which you'll find in front of you, is about the materiality of the smartphone. And it essentially tries to look at this phone from a material perspective and disintegrate it into getting a better understanding of where it comes from and where does it go once we are done with it. Interestingly, since we wanted to create this in a more participatory way, so the pilots for both toolkits were actually conducted with 30 to 35 young people who participated from different parts, joined us online, and a lot of their inputs have in fact given the final shape of the toolkit. So their feedback has fed into how we've built this out. Is Tanishri with us? Can we have her join in? Is the online moderator?
Yes, Satiksha, I'm here.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Satiksha. So let me give you all a brief introduction about the project and the making of the toolkit and other resources. So in this project, we focused on the triad of technology, planet, and we as users, specifically the youth. So having seen the statistics on digital adoption and internet usage of young individuals, the first pillar for us to focus on was unpacking the smartphone usage. In order to help young people understand their relationship with technology, we chose to create open multimedia toolkits using the smartphone as the model. We also wanted to deconstruct the singular unified perspective of the smartphone as an everyday personal gadget or a mere use and throw toy by introducing the hidden complexity of material flows, politics, and design decisions involved in the making of a smartphone, thereby segueing into questions around responsible usage of technology and sustainability. Introducing this complexity will help young people understand that it takes the entire world to make their smartphone and also help situate themselves and their devices as part of the larger socio-technical systems. So we believe that this situated understanding is essential to move away from the anthropocentric approach and promote the engagement of youth in building sustainable technological futures. Now, moving on to the process of implementing all these points through design, Can we move to the next slide on design? Thank you. This toolkit can be administered for individuals between 13 to 18 years of age. So the task at hand was not only to cover the above discussed points, but also to present them in an engaging way. So we accomplished this by introducing self-explanatory activities, reflection exercises, and structured visualization activities, which help them understand the entire life cycle of a smartphone from production to disposal. So this would also enable them to reimagine sustainable technological futures and the roles the youth can play towards it. So this toolkit is designed in such a way that it can be administered in different settings, such as a classroom, community space, or your neighborhood, even in small groups or individually. The toolkits can be done online or in print. However, to facilitate better conversation among youth on technology, we urge you to opt for a printed version. Next slide, please, Sham. Thank you. Apart from the toolkit, the project also includes a facilitator guide, which is meant for educators, teachers, parents, or anyone who's interested in administering the toolkit for young individuals. It is designed to give both the facilitator and the user the freedom to use this in multiple settings. The guide also includes additional resources for reference. Next slide, Shan. Thank you. We have also curated an online resource list comprising of books, articles, videos, and multimedia links touched upon in the toolkit for users, educators, or parents interested in digitalization and its impact on the environment. So this resource list would also be beneficial to any individual with a passion to work on technology and sustainability. I hope this gives an overview about the Unboxing Tech Toolkit project on the materiality of the smartphone. Now I'll pause here and request Titiksha to take over the session. Thank you.
Yeah, so given how our time is looking like, the next 15 minutes are essentially, we've planned them for each of you to sort of go over the toolkit. We'll have the toolkit also available up on the screen. So yeah, I will just head down there and see if everyone has a copy. Yeah, can you move back? And give me a copy. Give me a copy. So as you can see on the first page, we just have like a quick welcome. We have a little bit about you to get the person really involved and personally engaged. So they have to write down who this belongs to, what they will need, a little bit about the toolkit, and let's get started. So the first activity is essentially around when did you buy your current phone? How long did you think it would last when you actually bought it? Right? And how many smartphones do you own? This is a question which we did not initially have, but when we actually did our pilot, we realized that a lot of them did not have just one phone. So they're like, oh, when did you buy your phone? Which one? And so I was like, okay, we need to add a question of how many smartphones do you actually own? Is this your first smartphone? And from there, we sort of go into two parts and talk a lot about the criteria which you considered before buying, right? And this is important because a lot of young people do quite a bit of research before they buy a tech product. They're pretty tech savvy, they know, right? So did you think of the cost, the recycling, the battery life, brand, social proof? Did you talk to your friends about it and they told you this is a great model? Was it a new release, which was very important for you, right? And the idea around criteria was very important for us while creating the toolkit, because later on, we want to come back and tell them that few sustainability related criteria should also be a part of the thinking when you make decisions to buy a smartphone. The second part is where we go a bit into where do you think it comes from, right? Does it come from an online store? Does it come from a physical store which you went to buy? Is it local? Is it even coming from your own country, or is it elsewhere? If it's elsewhere, then which country is that? we also use info bytes as these small information packets across different pages, right? So in the first one, for instance, we talk about how China manufactured 30.5% of global smartphones in 2021. But interestingly, all the countries you see here, which are some of the major manufacturing hubs in the world, China, India, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. Apart from China, almost all of them are countries which are currently of interest to us at this fora. So, and I'm sure some of you represent them, and that's why it becomes important. Onto the next page. And Dhaneshri, I hope the online attendees also have their own copies and they're able to access it online. On the second and the third page, we essentially look at how it takes the entire world to make your smartphone, right? And herein we introduce the complex concept of supply chains, right? So we start by thinking about how many countries do you think were a part of the process of making your smartphone, right? And how it was not manufactured in one country. There's a complex supply chain which goes across, which enables something like a phone to be produced. And the associated activity that they have to do with that is on the next page. If you turn to page 3, yeah, you will see how they are asked to essentially trace the iPhone's journey across the globe. And it's very interesting. I urge each of you to take a pen and sort of do it yourself, because when you join the dots, it actually gives you how global this entire process is. Second, we also talk about how rare earth minerals and 3GTs, which are conflict minerals, are a part of your phone, why they need to be an important part of consideration while consumption of technology happens. So tungsten, tantalum, tin, and gold are mined and traded by armed groups in Eastern Congo, and that became a huge international issue to the point that both the EU and the United States now have laws prohibiting this kind of resource use, right? And these areas were notorious for human rights violations and abuses. Mining profits fund their activities, and laws all across the world now try to ensure responsible sourcing to end exploitation and support local development. Now, an important part is when we are buying a phone, we think of many things, but we don't essentially think about, in me using this technology, is another person being harmed? Is another region being harmed? When we are mining for certain resources in Congo or in Rwanda, what are the social and economic consequences of those mining activities? And that's what we want to sort of highlight here. And lastly, we talk a bit about responsible sourcing and repairability. So we also urge them to look at the repairability index of their own phone, which is available online for all of us to sort of check. In the next page, you will essentially find, 3 activities which are associated with what we did before. So you trace the iPhone supply chain, you spot rare earths in your phone and where they come from, and then track Fairphone's fair tungsten supply chain. And we want to use Fairphone as a good example of a company which is trying to create phones which are repairable, which are explicitly and transparently telling us about their sourcing practices of these minerals. And that's the sort of idea here.
Just to add to what Riksha is saying on where does your smartphone come from? The answer that we found in our pilots initially was it comes from a store and it goes to a store. The idea that we wanted to do was to sort of create the complex, and imagine this is a 13-year-old, right? I mean, this is not us. We have an understanding of this, but to a 13-year-old, the idea is to show that it is going across the world. And so many miles are occurred in travel, and so many places are a part of the supply chain. And some of those places are harmed in this if you're not looking at responsible sourcing. So the idea is to open up this device and look at the complexity of supply chains and the ecological and social costs of these supply chains, so that that sensitivity about the device comes in. That's the thinking behind this these slides. On to the next page. So the one thing that we did was to sort of open it out geographically and talk about how the rest of the world comes together. The other thing that we wanted to do was, okay, this is a toy. this is a cool toy that helps me do the things that I want to do. But what goes behind this cool toy? What is the kind of human technological or human science and technological advancement that has come together to make this device that does so many things for you, right? And this is to sort of pique the curiosity of those who are geeks and those who have that research orientation among young people to sort of unbox it and think about it in a bit more complexity, right? And it's two simple use cases, right? If you take a phone call, what happens? If you take a picture and upload it on social media, what happens, right? So what really happens? What components are being used? Which rare earths do they come from, right? What components in your speakers and microphones? So the idea is to unbox the materiality of it and make them think of it beyond it just being a toy, right? Once you make them look at it as a serious device with so many components and so much of a footprint and so much engineering behind it, the sense of responsibility naturally kicks in. That's the thinking that animates this page. And we wanted to quickly introduce them to sensors and a bit of the tech behind it in a way that a 13-year-old could get.
Next on, I think this is one of my favorite pages, which is about the life of our smartphone as we use it. And I urge each of you to sort of do this for yourself as well. The idea is that we are constant consumers of the smartphone in various ways in our daily lives. So one is, of course, the economic cost, which we are fairly well aware of, right? How much money did it cost you, not just to buy a phone, but to make the best use of it? So you're constantly spending on it, whether you realize it or not. What are the accessories which you buy along with your smartphone to get a complete experience? And here we want people to sort of write down and check the accessories they own, what did they cost, and how many times do they actually replace it over the span of owning a smartphone, right? So these could be earpods, their data plan, right? Selfie sticks, holders and covers, power banks, headphones, you name it, right? And yes, so we want them to actually write down the cost and add it up in their own jurisdiction. The second is, how much energy do we use to power our devices? So consumption is not just in terms of data or the money you spend, but also constantly using the phone means you are charging it. How long do you charge it for a day? How much do you think that energy costs? The third and the most ignored perhaps is the time and attention cost, right? So, and young people hear this all the time. Someone's always telling them, you're always on your phone. And yeah, that's right. But let's think about that a bit more. Like, what are we always doing on our phones, right? So what activities do we do most of the time? Let's click on those. Are we sure that the smartphone time which we spend is useful and meaningful to us? Does this add joy to our life, right? Those are questions. And this sort of links back to our first toolkit, where we go a bit deeper into the time and attention aspect of technology use. Finally, in the fourth one, and this is a bit different, is since we talked about minerals and elements from the periodic table before, which are essentially used to create the mobile phone, can you find out which elements you saw in the previous sheets are common and can be found in day-to-day objects? Now, this is, let's just think about it, right? Like, we often think of pen, paper, skillet, and let's say a syringe as very different items. But if you truly think about them, they have a lot in common in terms of the literal material, metals, and minerals that they are made up of. And we want to do something similar for the smartphone. So for example, the first one, which is a bulb, has tungsten as a very important component in it. And tungsten is also used in our smartphones. The second, which is a clock, uses silica. The third one, which are like probably your mending tools, use iron. The fourth, which is a syringe, uses nickel. And we want to tell them that your smartphone sits among these objects as one, right? And that hopefully will change the attitude and the way you perceive your smartphone itself as something which emanates from the earth and goes back to the earth in a particular way. The last two slides essentially talk about the dispose phase. And there we want to discuss, what happens to your phone? Where does it go once you say goodbye? So at some point you decided, okay, I'm done using this. I need a new one. This one needs to be out of my life, right? So from use to disuse, how do you dispose it off is, of course, the most important question. And the second is, what are the reasons or criteria for getting rid of your smartphone, right? And we've provided a small box here for people to sort of write down their own specific reasons, sorry. And from there, we want to sort of get to introducing the concept of planned and perceived obsolescence. So planned obsolescence describes a strategy of deliberately ensuring that the current version of a given product will become out of date at some point or useless within a known time period. So this is very interesting because it could, a well-made product should essentially become useless naturally when it becomes useless, right? But that's when it is planned, it is literally thought of in advance that it's going to become useless at, let's say, in a 1 year or a 2 year period. Similarly, with perceived obsolescence is when a customer is convinced that he or she needs an updated product, even though his or her existing product is working well. And this is where a lot of the social dynamics, the social proofing of it is very important. That is something that deeply impacts youth choices. Now, we want them to understand the concept of planned and perceived obsolescence and go back to their list of criteria and see where was planned obsolescence or perceived obsolescence a part of their decision-making process. So one thing we've tried to do here is we've tried to make the link between the concepts, the activities come back to you as a person, which is why the answers for each person in this toolkit will be very unique to them. There is no single right or wrong answer here. It's going to be something that you find out for your own self. And in the last bit, we talk a bit about the afterlife of the smartphone and where does it essentially go. Also talking about how a lot of the minerals used in smartphones have less than 1% recycling rate. So if you need more of them, the only way currently that we have, given technological processes, is to mine further. And this is also true. For example, a lot of conversation around lithium ion batteries or lithium being used in a lot of green products also lands up into, right? Finally, the last page here, and I don't know why the visual is not coming up correctly, but I hope you can refer to your printed copy, is from you to planetary future. So far we've talked about you a lot, right? We've talked about you buying a phone, you using a phone, and you disposing a phone. But then what is the connection between you and the planet across this process, right? So you have been the center of attention this whole time, right? We've been thinking about what your relationship with it is, but now let's step back for a minute and realize that this kind of thinking is precisely anthropocentrism, right? Thinking that humans are the central element of the universe and engaging with reality in a way where we are at not just the apex, but at the center at all times is what needs to be shifted. So what if we shifted the focus and made the earth the center of this conversation for a second, right? How would we think differently about technology and the role that it plays in the larger life of the earth, right? And from there, we want to sort of come into probing a few questions around what can we do for the future of us and the planet. So we all work together to build the future we want. We also didn't want to end this toolkit on a dystopic note, right? Yeah, a lot of things are not working out, and that's great. But we want to impart this sense of, us making the right decisions can actually lead to a better future. And how can we imagine that? So we essentially try to probe them by saying, what if you were an innovator, a researcher, a political leader, a designer, right? As you grow old and pick your career paths, how would this impact your actions, and then your actions would create a better future for us all. And the absolutely final page is an absolutely open prompt, which is what is the technological future that you want to live in? And this is very interesting when we especially talk about the Asia Pacific, because a lot of times when we think about a technological future, we all think of the New York skyscrapers, or skyscrapers somewhere is our imagination of the future world. But that does not have to essentially be the case. And the probe is for us to also think about our future in ways which are non-Western, which are plural, which emanate from our own experience of life and long traditions of lived knowledge, right? So this is a very quick sift through of the toolkit, and I urge you to either do this yourselves, or if you want to take a copy back home, you want to share it with others, please feel free to do that as well. Yes. Shyam, over to you.
Thanks, Tutiksha. I think we just wanted to give you a quick overview of the toolkit and then open the floor to your thoughts and suggestions. We wanted to get some feedback. Some of the questions that we had were, how can we what are best ways to engage with communities of educators, if there are some in this room? How do we facilitate translations to different languages, workshops for schools, communities, organizations? Are there ways to include this or bring something similar to this as parts of school curricula? How do we bring these global issues in local context, because the Asia Pacific is extremely diverse? This is a simple proof of concept. We don't claim this to be the best way to do things. This is not the only way to do things, but this is a starting point from where similar approaches can be taken forward. And just open to your thoughts and inputs on this, on how we can take this forward together. If some of you are educators, some of you are people who work in the space, this is a form, a simple QR code from where you can connect to us, and we'd be happy to enable translations or support communities or schools or curricula or policymakers in taking some of this forward. So I think this is a good point to pause and open the floor. Looking forward to your thoughts, feedback, questions, ideas.
So one of the core reasons we wanted to open this out to a non-teen audience as well was to understand how we can take resources like this forward together as a region. Because one of the things that we have gotten as feedback is there's a lot of interest from educators to translate this into their local languages and adapt, right? I would very much like to open the floor for discussion, comments, or questions now. Of course, anything you may want to say, but also vis-a-vis some of the questions we have up here, which are how can we take this forward as a region? Who are the potential stakeholders who we should be engaging with and collaborating with for this particular project? Who do you think we should reach out to in order to make this happen? What are the possible areas of focus in the future pertaining to this project? So here we talked about materiality, but if you think there's another pressing issue in digitalization which needs the engagement of youth, what would that be like? And finally, what are other larger themes which can be incorporated to make this project more holistic in nature? And I sort of open the floor out to you, please. Looking forward to your comments.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie Hammer. Just focusing on that fourth question you have there, what other larger themes could be incorporated in the future? The theme that occurs to me is what is the rest of the infrastructure that is needed to make smartphones work? What are the landlines, the satellites, all of the transmission technologies, and what are the resources and minerals and energy required in them that actually add to this bill that we have to make it functional?
Question? I didn't see a second question.
I'm Chandani Gupta from the Consumer Policy Research Center. Firstly, thank you so much for sharing such a wonderful toolkit. I think it's something that is so inspirational that I think it'd be one that would be great to see utilized in schools at some point. I have a question and I also have a comment. So firstly, my question is, when you did actually raise this with teens and you went through the exercise, I would love to hear what their reactions has been when they've actually gone through it and realized how far their iPhone has traveled or their smartphone has traveled. The other side, in terms of possible opportunities or where we could go next, this is just at one point, but it is also a way to show cause for policymakers to think more about planned obsolescence and the right to repair. It's so great that India already has legislation in that space, but this idea that we still don't know from the industry how long they expect it to last, how long they'll provide software updates. Sometimes they are planning the obsolescence purely by the software updates. So trying to use these kind of tools to be able to drive that change where we get really clear-cut options on what does that obsolescence or end of life look like for these products. Thanks.
So thank you so much for the comment. I think that's really important. In fact, something that we are also thinking of how a lot of this information can feed into the larger policy debate around these issues, which is happening in India and other countries in the region as well. So as to your first question, very unexpected responses, in fact. So a lot of times what we thought will click did not click, and what we thought will not click really clicked. And but what has been reassuring as far as the reactions is concerned is, one, I think they really like the sort of pop color, the way it is presented. So it doesn't seem very heavy or gloomy or preachy to them. Otherwise, they're like, hey, you know, you live in a different digital world than I do. And that's sort of the starting point of the conversation. So I think in that, and that's why we made the kind of design decisions that we did in the construction of the toolkit. Interestingly, when we show this to others, the more senior people think it's a toy, but because they're like, oh, you know, it's not serious, it's not a policy brief. But with a younger audience, that was one thing which was very interesting. The second is, I think almost everyone, especially when it came to the cost aspect of it, right? I think that's where a lot of the young people responded very, very positively, because they had never thought about the energy cost or the associated cost. Forget the planetary cost, but also the time and attention cost. I think that was the most interesting aspect for them, given, I think, how crucial it is in their life context. So I think those were some of the parts which really clicked, and there was that aha moment. Oh, I need to think about this more. Yeah.
And thank you for your inputs on the larger infrastructure on which this depends. I think that's something that we'd like to highlight going forward. I think that's also where the internet comes in, and the whole infrastructure that powers what we call the internet comes in. I think that's important for people to know and also become custodians of in some time. Yeah, absolutely.
So there's two exclusives.
My name's David Vivian from APrIGF. Yeah, thanks very much for sharing this tool. I think it's really good in terms of awareness raising. My question is, what scope is there within the toolkit in terms of a call to action for the kids who are actually using this tool, in terms of reflecting what they can be actually doing in the short term right now based on the knowledge they've gained in the long term? And also, I think this is a very useful tool in terms of collecting responses, their stories, and actually feeding that up into policy forums. So I'd just like to know where's that link between we're actually collecting the data and in terms of analysing it and advocating for change at higher levels, and where's that mechanism and feeding between the project that you're running and the different mechanisms?
I'd like to say thank you very much. It's very informative and create awareness, like all the other people have said. I'd just like to know what the scope is to expand it to include other devices, because most children 13 plus have laptops plus smartphones plus other devices. So it'd be great to sort of incorporate that, and to the other people's points, it then feeds up into policies and how we can actually utilise this information for creating a better sustainability environment we live in.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I have one comment and one question. So my comment is there a specific reason why you've considered energy costs and environment costs and the time that they've spent? Is there a reason why health and if there are any health related issues or health related costs that arose particularly out of smartphone usage were not considered? Because that is something that a lot of my peer group, we face it, but then we talk about it and then we forget about it once that problem is solved. Something similar to how environmental concerns, right? We realize it when there is a wildfire happening, and then we tend to forget about it until the next one. And one of my questions was, I
the data that you've collected till now from students between the ages of 13 to 18, is that data anonymously, of course, is that data or any analysis of that data published anywhere about what their views are, or is there any pattern that you're seeing that can help us frame these policies better for the future?
Thank you so much for your comments. I think when we are talking about taking this to as youth feedback to public policy or to decision makers, I think that's an excellent suggestion. I think that's something that we are thinking about. But the challenge that sort of comes in is that how do we really collect this in a way that is anonymized? How do we ensure that this feedback is taken safely? We've just completed this project a month ago, but we are exploring along these lines, and suggestions on how best we can do that would be most welcome. And one way, I think that's a dual purpose of this toolkit, right? One is that you help you provide a proto resource that educators and others can use and maybe probably bring as part of curriculums or extracurricular activities. The other is this becomes a funnel to take youth voices back to policymakers in a way that is engaging and serious beyond just a survey. So it's still figuring out the exact modalities of how to go about that and see how it works. I think on the smartphone and other devices, I think the reason we chose the smartphone is that it's one of the most intimate devices, but the smartphone here, the way we did it was a metaphor for technology in general. How do we, if this applies to the smartphone, it should apply to my other devices as well. Another way to think about it is we want to create a prototype of a toolkit that would be engaging for the youth, right? And how do we translate some of the complex research on supply chains and some of these other issues into ways that do not, in ways that a young person's attention span holds and engagement holds. So we're very happy if somebody has different ideas, transmission infrastructure, different devices, different digital issues. Please feel free to adopt and take this forward. We'd be very happy, and we can support you with the kind of work that we've done for the design and other aspects that have worked for young people. I think you.
So Shraddha, is it? Yeah. So to Shraddha's question, actually, one is we did think about health, specifically psychological health, and that's the first toolkit which we didn't get the time to sort of get into today. But I will be sure to share that as well. As far as the more physical health aspects is concerned, it's a lot more, I mean, we tried looking for it, but the science on that seems to be very contested till yet. And I don't want to get into why that contestation exists. We all know there's a larger politics behind that discussion as well. But as far as the psychological harms and impacts are concerned, quite a few pages in the first toolkit, in fact, talk about how do you feel after mobile phone use, right? How, like, so, and there we saw an interesting correlation, because when we actually asked people, what do you do for the most time on their smartphone, and then asked them to go check it, it did not really match. So what they thought they were doing was different from what they were actually doing. I still remember one of these young teen girls who was a part of the pilot, and she spent quite a lot of time on social media. But when we came to the page where it was a lot more about reflection, she said, I feel tired a lot and I feel lonely a lot. And that stuck something. She was like, oh, I'm using social media a lot, but the feelings that are resultant after it are not really great. Now, it may not seem like a great deal to us, but it's a huge deal for a 15-year-old to have that realization and think about, how their relationship with technology is getting shaped in a way which they're not conscious of. So yes, and I will reach out to you after this. To your second comment, which was about analysis or data. So our pilot was done in a completely anonymized, we never recorded it for security purposes, also because a lot of the information that teens shared with us was very personal information. And we did not at the time want to get into how to collect this personal information, how do we make sure that it remains secure and so on. So, but like several of you have mentioned, I think this toolkit has an opportunity. It has that potential to kind of help us articulate voices of the youth, which we get back, and that can, go into policy discussions. So thank you so much for that suggestion. It's something that, we've thought about, but now I think we'll be a lot more confident in taking it forward. Yes. Yes, Dhaneshri, if there are any virtual comments or questions, perhaps we can share them now.
Sure, Tatiksha. So far, we don't have any comments or feedbacks or questions from the virtual participants.
Okay, in which case I encourage them, if they have something to say or something to ask, that would be great. Please feel free to unmute yourself and talk, or drop a comment, in which case Dhanyashri will read it out for us. In the meantime, a question I have for the audience here, since we are at the Asia Pacific Regional IGF, and the Youth IGF is a huge part of this discussion as well. A lot of that will feed into the main IGF in Kyoto later this year. I want to also open this question out to what are other kinds of stakeholders or platforms you think we can take this to and engage with in order to push the conversation forward beyond just sustainability, to bringing youth voices more, more actively into this discussion. So any comments there or suggestions will be very helpful.
Thank you. In my other hat, besides running around with the mic and other things, I'm part of the secretariat team for the APrIGF, and we also have the Youth IGF that you mentioned just now. And I think there is quite a large network of youth initiatives that are really interested in talking about these issues, not just internet governance issues, but specifically with sustainability, with how devices are affecting mental health. And I think a lot of them would have great interest in either giving you more information or collaborating. So I would urge you to take this beautiful toolkit that you've printed and actually talk to the young people who are around. I think they're in P5, the other room today. So after this session, please definitely go and talk to them, see if they have different initiatives that do want to collaborate. And I'm also in the middle of looking after the room physically. I'm actually looking through the toolkit, and I think it's a really important and great, I guess this is after the pilot, first edition of the toolkit. One more question I had, I think you mentioned a little earlier as well, is that we are in the Asia Pacific region. We are very diverse. And you mentioned something about languages. I don't know what next steps might be in scaling it to different languages, so you can actually go into more local jurisdictions, other states, and see that kind of data to collect. Thanks.
Thank you for that, and I'll be sure to connect with people in the Youth IGF and have them engage with this. On the language point, so this has been published under a Creative Commons license, which allows for translation as well as adaptation. And what we do on our end is, if someone reaches out to us for translation or adaptation, we give them support from our end to sort of make sure that the translation is going the right way and it's adopted in a way which works out. What we have been thinking, though, as far as the translation bit is concerned, is if over the next few years we can ourselves provide some financial support to schools or educators who are interested in translating it, so that we can compensate them for their time. And then in that region, it is again available as an open resource for anyone to use. But if you are from an organization which, and you think that this would be beneficial in your communities when translated, please reach out to us and we'd be happy to support in whatever way we can. Yes.
So in response to the question that you asked about youth communities or whether they can collaborate and whether they can help you out with this, I'm sure there are a lot more, but currently I am part of at least 5 of them, a few of which are in the Asia Pacific, but a lot of these are across the globe. And most of these are youth community members who are interested in the ideas of internet governance, interested in ICT, interested in how that affects our lives and our time. So this will definitely be a great avenue for us to take this forward there. And I would absolutely love it if I could connect you with any one of them, or like get in touch with all of them throughout. One more question that one thing that we've observed in the past is when we have an option between a printed version or a virtual version, most of us tend to prefer the one where we can look at it on screen anytime we want, right? Because the printed version, I have it here in my bag, and later I'll have to look for it, especially since it's colorful, but it's still paper. So you keep it between 3 books and then you don't realize where it is. But I wanted to ask, is there like a Canva or a Miro board version where you can collaborate and work or answer on it? If it is, then if you can share the link, it would be incredibly helpful.
Thank you, Shraddha, and I will take you up on the offer to connect with these communities. I will share the link to the project website as well for everyone's benefit. So we have the toolkit in the colored version. We have a low resource print version because I know getting colored prints is expensive. We have a black and white version, which looks equally nice, but maybe cheaper to print. We have an online Miro version, which you can just administer for yourself, create a copy and go on. And of course, there's a PDF for those who find it easier to do. Apart from that, I think like Dhaneshri had mentioned, we have a facilitator guide, which has a whole lot of related books, articles, podcasts, and video resources, which someone may want to screen or share. And then we have a resource list, which has a whole bunch of additional resources around the topics that we have touched upon in the toolkit. Yeah.
I think that's 20 seconds to go. So thank you so much, everyone, for participating in this. And we've gotten really valuable feedback. And we look forward to taking some of this forward. And if there's anybody, any communities that you know that we could partner with, the idea was to not think of this as a singular initiative that the Pranava Institute will push forward, but rather to put out an open educational resource that communities can adopt. We can help translations and maybe support future work that is done. So thank you so much for your participation and looking forward to taking some of the connects offline as well. Thank you.
Split my brain into two.
Recording stopped.